But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. 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 Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive.
Meaning Wave, because music is everything.
And so that is a nice little tangle. If I put this in the language of Oriental philosophy and religion, it would be something like this. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. One who abandons that desire attains nirvana, which is supreme peace, liberation. Nirvana means in Sanskrit, blow out. That is, exhale the breath. Exhale the breath. The opposite, desire, is to breathe in. Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go. Let go. But the problem is, if I desire not to desire, is that not already desire? How can I desire not to desire? How can I surrender myself when myself is precisely an urge to hold on, to cling to life, to continue to survive. To survive. To survive. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. I can see rationally that by clinging to myself I may strangle myself. I may be like a person who has a bad habit, as a result of which he is committing suicide. And he knows that, but can't give it up, because the means of death are so sweet.
Monks used to keep skulls on their desks. And people nowadays think that was very morbid. Everything's falling apart. So don't try and stop it. When you're falling off a precipice, it doesn't do you any good to hang on to a rock that's falling with you. See? But everything is doing that. And so, again, this is another case of our completely wasting our energy in trying to prevent the world from falling apart. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. 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 Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. When the Hindu says everything is unreal, the Westerner reacts and says, no, you can't treat life as a dream. It's serious, it's real, it's for real. And what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? Well, how real do you want it to be? This is, in other words, everything, insofar as it's falling apart, everything is changing, it is like smoke. And we all feel that smoke has a lesser degree of reality than wood. It's an image of the evanescent, of the ghostly. So there's this idea the whole world is this mirage. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's only bad if you cling to it, if you try to lean on it. But if you don't lean on it, it's a grand illusion. So the word Maya means not only illusion, but it means art, it means magic, and it means creative power. So this is the big act. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. With the free energy. With the free energy. Don't do it. And it's perhaps easier to feel the world in that way in a tropical country where death is very common and where you just watch things dissolve before your eyes and yet burst out and grow again. The whole world is changing. Maybe easier to think that way than in our environment. Although when you're out in California, the human landscape changes so fast that no town is the same for 2 years. Any mailing list that you have changes 1/3 addresses per annum. Nothing stays put. The hills are shadows and they flow from form to form and nothing stands.
It's a beautiful day to be alive here at the peak of recorded human civilization.
Akira.
He's got clout.
And what seems a good thing today turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evil. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition.
In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operation, the most weird surgery. People suspended for days and days on end on the end of tubes with X-ray penetration. Burning. People undergoing shock treatment. People locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors of mental institutions. In all good faith, that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things. Awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We can look back at those people and see how evil that was. But we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. So therefore, beware of virtue. So therefore, beware of virtue.
This is Source Wave Radio by Akira the Dawn. You are listening to Flash Vibes.
We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. To improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You had better be democratic, or we'll shoot you. And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you do this, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you do this, you would be improved. So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind of human beings ought we to be? So, I said, how will those of us who are genetically unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid very much that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain, which is becoming ecologically destructive. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. You realize that? Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1 million saints. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds of people changes. We may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. The more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is.
contrast between the words we use, explicit and implicit. They're very valuable words. What is explicit? What's on the outside? Let's say how we come on publicly. Explicitly, we are thus and so. We have a fight. We're in competition, say, in business, explicitly. But implicitly, we've worked this out. We've agreed in a secret way that nobody knows about that this competition is extremely valuable to both of us. Take it politically, for example. Let's take the situation of Russia versus the United States. Explicitly, in public, this has to be a big fight. These two ways of life, these two ideologies are opposed. They say, no, we're... But behind the scenes, it's all been carefully worked out. You bet it has. That this opposition has to happen. Because our economy depends on it, and their economy depends on it. And everybody knows this, who's smart. But there are a lot of people who get taken in by the propaganda, and they should be taken in because that makes the thing work. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 And everything works this way. When swans start to mate, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. And they begin to fight. I had a long talk about this with C.G. Jung. He lived on the edge of Lake Zurich, and he had a little summer house right on the water's edge, and there were many swans there. And I was getting up at the end of a conversation with him, and we were beginning to walk back to the main house, and I said, "Isn't it true that swans are monogamous?" And he said, "Yes, they are." He said, "Do you know, I have had most interesting relationships between these swans, and many of my female patients who thought they were homosexual." And Jung wasn't a sexual snob. I mean, he understood all the legitimacy of all kinds of sexual variation. But he said it has been a point of departure for our discussions. And he said it's a very funny thing that when they begin to mate, they start fighting. And they don't know what it's all about, and then suddenly the fight turns into lovemaking. So that's what I mean. Underneath opposition, there is love. Underneath duality, there's unity. The Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed. But it's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 See, here's that weaving principle. The things hold together by over, under, over, over, under, over, over, under. And that creates a stuff, it creates fabric, it creates clothing, it creates shelter, it creates what we call matter. Matter, mater, mother, and also the same word, maya, illusion. See, the world as a marvelous illusion.
It's crazy, but that's the way it goes. 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 It's crazy, that's the way it goes.
A marvelous illusion. A marvelous illusion. A marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy, but that's the way it goes.
A marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy, that's the way it goes.
You're listening to Akira the Don, artist, DJ, wave lord, and architect of the Meaning Wave universe.
You all had a tremendous humor. And he knew that nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that. There was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, which is laughing at other people. But real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh. If I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point. That there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, and it is supposed to be kind of messy on the back side. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in front, have the back in the back. The back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge. And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come. I mean, we do ever so many things like that. And if you don't do it, if you don't think you do it, and you think, well, really, my embroidery is the same on both sides, see? Well, you're deceiving yourself. Because what you're doing is you're taking the shortcuts in another dimension, which you're keeping out of consciousness. Everybody takes the shortcuts. Everybody plays tricks. Everybody has in himself an element of duplicity, of deception. Because you see, from this point of view that I'm discussing, where the web is the trap, to be is to deceive. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths, that nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. To be is to deceive. To be is to deceive.
Hi, David Hasselhoff, alias The Hoff. You're listening to Akira the Dog. Stay tuned.
So, in the same way, we find that the watching self, or the observing self, behind all our thoughts and feelings, is itself a thought. That is to say, when the police enter a house in which there are thieves, the thieves go up from the ground floor to the first floor. When the police arrive on the first floor, the thieves have gone up to the second. And so to the third, and finally out to the roof. And so when the ego is about to be unmasked, it immediately identifies with the higher self. It goes up a level. Because the religious game is simply a refined and highbrow version of the ordinary game. How can I outwit me? How can I one-up me? So, if I find, for example, that in the quest for pleasure, the ordinary pleasures of the world, food, sex, power, food, sex, power, all this becomes a drag, and I think, no, it isn't there, so I go in for the arts, literature, poetry, music, and I absorb myself in those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power, literature, poetry, music, food, So I go to psychoanalysis. And then I found out that's not the answer. I go to religion. But I'm still seeking what I was seeking when I wanted candy bars. I want to get that goodie. Only I see now that, of course, it's not going to be a material goodie. All material goodies fall apart. But maybe there's a spiritual goodie that's not going to fall apart. But in that quest, the quest is not different from the quest for the candy bar. Same old story. Only you've refined the candy bar, made it abstract and holy and blessed and so on. So it is with the higher self. The higher self's your old ego. And you sure hope it is eternal. Food, sex, power. I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power. I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power. I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power. Therefore, if we see that you can't outwit yourself, you can't be unself-conscious on purpose, you can't be designedly spontaneous, and you cannot be genuinely loving by intending to love. By intending to love. Either you love someone or you don't. Someone, no, you don't. If you pretend to love a person, you deceive them and build up reasons for resentment. You say, well, I ought to be honest. That's the beginning of it. Oh, so many lies you can't imagine. So many lies you can't imagine. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. Like when I hear a lot said about love, big love thing on. Everybody's got to love everybody. Everybody sings songs about love. Do you know what I do? I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtue, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be, you don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue. To see, to entertain the miracles of color and form. You say, oh, that's just... But that's real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word, a strength, is when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz. They're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble. Because more diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. And be assured that everybody of whatever nationality or political frame of mind or religion always goes to war with a sense of complete rightness. The other side is the devil. Our opponents, whether in China or Russia or Vietnam, have the same feeling of righteousness about what they're doing as we have on our side. And the plague on both houses, because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Of virtue. The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. The thieves of virtue. The goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Which is the form of our own proverb. The road to hell is paved with good intention. Grace. Well, ask God, maybe he'll give it to you. And the theologian will tell you, yes, God gives his grace freely. He gives it to all because he loves all. It's here like the air. All you have to do is receive it. Or a more orthodox, a Catholic Christian would say, all you have to do is to be baptized, to take the holy sacrament of the altar, the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and there is the grace right there. And it's given by these simple physical means so that it's very easily and readily available. Well, a lot of people got baptized, and it doesn't always take. People fall from grace. Why do they? You see, we're just talking about the same old problem, but we've put it a step up. But it's the same problem. How can I improve myself? Was the first problem. The second problem is, do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? How can I accept grace? They're both the same problem. Because you got to make a move, which will put yourself out of your own control into the control of a better. If you don't believe in the Christian kind of a God, you can believe in the Hindu kind of a God, who is your inner self. You see, you've got a lower self, which you can call your ego. That's that little scoundrelous fellow, always out for me. But behind the ego, there is the Atman, the inner self, the inward light, as Quakers would call it, the real self, the spirit, which is substantially identical with God. So you've got to meditate in such a way that you identify with your higher self. How do you do that? Well, you start by watching all your thoughts very carefully, watching your feelings, watching your emotions, so that you begin to build up a sense of separation between the watcher and what is watched. Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? Do you want grace? no longer carried away by your own stream of consciousness. You remain the witness, impassively, impartially, suspending judgment and watching it all go on. That seems to be something like progress. At least you're taking an objective view of what is going on. You are beginning to be in a position to control it. But just wait a minute. Who is this self behind the self? The watching self. Can you watch that one? It's interesting if you do. Because you find out, of course, that this is just as the problem of grace is nothing more than a transposition of the first problem. How am I to be unselfish? By my own power. It becomes how am I to get grace by my own power.
He's got clout.
The web of life. Let me try from the first to indicate the point that we're aiming at. The point is this, that human consciousness is at the same time as being a form of awareness and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. And because of this, it leaves out things that are terribly important. It leaves out things that would, if we did know them, allay our anxieties and fears and horrors. And if we could extend our awareness, you see, to include those things that we leave out, we would have a deep interior peace. Because we would all know the one thing that you mustn't know. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more, according to the rules of our particular social game. The one thing you mustn't know, that's really not allowed, that is the lowdown on life. And the lowdown, on the one hand, means the real dirt on things. But the lowdown is also what is profound, what is mysterious, what is in the depths. And there's something left out. And our everyday consciousness screens this out in the same way that when you say you have weaving, you have, say, on this rug here in front of us, when the black finishes here, the black threads will go underneath and then appear again over here, then they'll go underneath the white and then they'll appear again over here, so that the back will be the obverse pattern of the front. Now, the world is like that. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more selective. They pick out certain things. They are receptive. For example, we have a small band, what you might call a spectrum of light, of sound, of tactile sensation, and so on, to which the human organism is sensitive. But we know that outside that small band, there is a huge range of vibrations to which we have built instruments that are sensitive. Things like cosmic rays, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, hard X-rays, and so on. They're all outside the band of our spectrum. And obviously, there are things that are outside the range of our instruments. We may build new instruments someday which will evoke, bring into our consciousness other orders of vibration altogether, but yet, as yet, we don't know about. So you could imagine, you see, the universe is a vast system of vibrations and has infinite possibilities. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in.
I've gone for many a run or a walk listening to your Alan Watts music, which I think is like the best Alan Watts remixes available on the internet or in the world, and they're incredible because I love Watts.
Do you know who Akira the Dawn is? Of course, he's amazing.
His name is Alan Watts, do you know?
The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The same problem arises in medicine, because the body is a very complexly interrelated organism. And if you look at the body in a superficial way, you may see there's something wrong with it. It's chickenpox, and there's spots that itch. You might say, well, spots are there, cut them off. So you kill the bug. Well, then you find you've got a real problem, because you have to introduce some bugs to kill the bug, like bringing rabbits into Australia. And that starts going all over the place and getting out of there. But then you think, but now wait a minute, it wasn't the bugs in the blood, there are bugs all over the place. What was wrong with this person that his blood system suddenly became vulnerable to those particular bugs? His resistance wasn't up. Therefore, what you should have given was not an antibiotic, but vitamins. Okay, so we're going to build up his resistance. But resistance to what? You may build up resistance to this and this and this class of bugs, but then there's another one that loves that situation. He comes right in. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. See, we always look at the human being medically in bits and pieces, because because we have heart specialists, lung specialists, bone specialists, nerve specialists, and so on. And so on. And they each see the human being from their point of view. There are a few generalists, but they realize the human body is so complicated that no one mind can understand it. And furthermore, supposing we do succeed in healing all these people of their diseases, what do we then do about the population problem? I mean, we've stopped cholera, the black bubonic plague, we're getting the better of tuberculosis, we may fix cancer and heart disease. Then what will people die of? Well, then let's go on living. When the enormous quantities of it. Then we have to fix this birth thing. Pills for everybody. Then we find what are the effects, the side effects of those pills? What are the psychological effects upon men and women of not breeding children in the usual way? We don't know. 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 The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. So you see, there's something going on. This web may be looked at as pattern, and the world is basically patterning. What else do you do when you come to think of it? What else do you do when you come to think of it? When you eat, you are turning food into the pattern of your skeleton, your muscles, and your nervous system. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. But then you want other patterns. You like to look through a microscope and see the patterns that exist in the small world. And see the patterns. You like to look through a kaleidoscope or a telescope and see the patterns. You like to have paintings around and see the patterns. You like to watch the water play and see the patterns. You want to watch the birds go and the clouds and all that. Fascinating patterns. And that really doesn't it seem to be the point? I mean, what do you do when you're very rich? It takes up a rascal of ancient times who became very rich by all sorts of skullduggery and warfare and so on. He got himself a suit of armor, a beautiful sword. And he had the armorer make the most intricate patterns, arabesques of inlaid gold on the steel. Why? Because it's, as they say among the Pennsylvania Dutch,
It's for nice. It's a great thing to have all that jazz. And that's what we go for. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. But then you want other patterns. You like to look through a microscope and see the patterns that exist in the small world. And see the patterns. You like to look through a kaleidoscope or a teleidoscope and see the patterns. You like to have paintings around and see the patterns. You like to watch the water play and see the patterns. You want to watch the birds go and the clouds and all that. Fascinating patterns. Perfect.
Now you may say, I need some help in this process, and therefore I am going to find someone else to help me. It may be a therapist. It may be a clergyman. It may be a guru. It may be any kind of person who teaches a technique of self-improvement. Now, how will you know whether this person is able to teach you? How can you judge, for example, whether a psychotherapist is effective or just a charlatan? How can you judge whether a guru is himself spiritually wise or merely a good chatterbox? Well, of course, you ask your friends, you ask his other students or patients, and they're all, of course, enthusiastic. You have to be enthusiastic when you bought something expensive. If you bought an automobile which turned out to be a lemon, it's very difficult to admit that it was a lemon and that you were fooled. And it's the same when you buy a religion or an expensive operation. But what people do not sufficiently realize is that when you pick an authority, whether it's a psychotherapeutic one or a religious one, you chose it. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. In other words, that this fellow or this book or this system is the right one is your opinion. And how are you competent to judge? After all, if you're saying to this other person or other source, I think you are the authority, that's your opinion. So you cannot really judge whether an authority is a sound authority unless you yourself are a sound authority. Otherwise, you may just be being fooled. You may say, for example, I believe that the Bible is the Word of God. All right, that's your opinion. I know the Bible says it's the Word of God, but it's your opinion that the Bible is not lying. The church says the Bible is the Word of God, but it's your opinion that the church is right. You cannot escape from that situation. It's your opinion. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. So you see, when you select an authority who will help you to improve yourself, it's like hiring the police out of your tax money and putting them in charge of seeing that you obey the law. I mean, can't you take care of yourselves? I mean, is this the land of the free and the home of the brave, or isn't it? But you see, nobody seems to want to be in charge of themselves. Because they feel they can't do it. As St. Paul said, to will is present with me, but how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. To will is present with me, but how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. So there at once, we are in difficulty. Because trying to improve yourself is like trying to lift yourself up into the air by tugging at your own bootstraps. And it can't be done. With me, but how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. To will is present with me, but how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do.
meaningwave.com, because happiness is a side effect of meaning.
In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be, you don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue. To see, to entertain the miracles of color and form. You say, oh, that's just... But that's real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, as virtue, as virtue, as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, as virtue, as virtue, as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word, a strength, is when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz. They're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble. Because more diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. And be assured that everybody of whatever nationality or political frame of mind or religion always goes to war with a sense of complete rightness. The other side is the devil. Our opponents, whether in China or Russia or Vietnam, have the same feeling of righteousness about what they're doing as we have on our side. And a plague on both houses. Because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. Form of our own proverb. The road to hell is paved with good intention. Improving are the one who needs to be improved. And this also goes for society. You who will do the improving are the one who needs to be improved. And this also goes for society. We can change society. We can get enormous enthusiasm going out of the idea that there is a revolution afoot and that this revolution is going to set everything to right. Do you know a revolution that ever set anything to right? Whether the revolution came from the left wing or from the right wing, the best forms of government that have ever existed in the world are those which muddled through, where they didn't have any very clear setup of control, but they muddle along. A kind of what I'll call controlled anarchy seems to work out better than anything else. When we have a great system and great power to put it into effect, there is always more violence, more bloodshed, more trouble. Always more violence, more bloodshed. more trouble. Always more violence, more bloodshed, more trouble. It makes no difference. Whether it be Chairman Mao or Adolf Hitler. So, what instead, therefore, if we see that you can't outwit yourself, you can't be unself-conscious on purpose, you can't be designedly spontaneous, and you cannot be genuinely loving by intending to love, by intending to love. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. If you pretend to love a person, you deceive them and build up reasons for resentment. You say, well, I ought to be honest. That's the beginning of it. Oh, so many lies you can't imagine. So many lies you can't imagine. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. Like when I hear a lot said about love, a big love thing on the way. Everybody's got to love everybody. And we sing songs about love. Do you know what I do? I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. So, let's look at this thing from another point of view, which you will at first think highly depressing. Let's supposing we can't do anything to change ourselves. Suppose we're stuck with it. Now that is the worst thing an American audience can hear. There's no way of improving yourself, because every kind of culture in this country is dedicated to self-improvement. Just take jogging, that deplorable practice. It's a very nice thing to run and to go dancing across the hills at a fast speed. are these joggers, shaking their bones, rattling their brains, running on their heels. There's a grimness about it. It's determinately good for you. Why do you go to school? The whole point of coming to school is that you're interested in something. You don't come to improve yourself. But the trouble is that the schools got the wrong idea. They gave people honors for learning. The reward for studying French should be the ability to speak French and enjoy reading French and having fun with French people. But when you get a degree for it, then the degree becomes the point in a game of one-upmanship. And of course, one-upmanship is the main business of the educational community today. You learn all the rules of how to be a good professor. How to be a good professor. It's instructive to go to a professional professor's meeting. In my field, which is philosophy, you go to a congress of philosophers, and you'll find when they all get together in the bar or in the restaurant in somebody's room, the one thing they don't talk about is philosophy. It is very bad form indeed to show interest in philosophy among your colleagues. The same is exactly true in clergy gatherings. They don't talk about religion. What they both talk about is politics. Church politics and academic politics. Because it's bad form to be brilliant on a faculty. Because it outclasses your colleagues. Therefore, faculty people tend to cultivate the studied mediocrity. If you get mobs of students coming to your lectures, you get pretty black looks from your colleagues. But you see what it is? It's scholarship about scholarship, not scholarship. Just as learning, because learning is good for you, is irrelevant to learning. The whole idea of improving yourself by learning is irrelevant to the learning process. And in the same way, doing business is doing business. Doing business, such as manufacturing clothes, is a very good thing to do. I could conceive that it would be extremely enjoyable, something one could be very proud of, to make good clothes. Of course you need to sell them because you need to eat. But to make clothes to make money raises another question. Because then your interest is not in making clothes, it's in making money, and then you're going to cheat on the clothes. And then you get an awful lot of money and you don't know what to do with it. The study mediocrity. The study mediocrity. You can't eat 10 roasts of beef in one day. Can't live in 6 houses at once. Can't drive 3 Rolls Royces at the same time. What do you do?
Watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this. Watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this.
Well, you just go make more money. You put your money back. Invest it in something else and it'll make more. And you don't give a damn how it's made, so long as they make it. You don't care if they foul the rivers, put oil fumes throughout the air everywhere, kill off all the fish. So long as you see these figures happen, you're not aware of anything else. So you see, you went out to do a self-improvement thing. Making money, you see, is a measure of improvement, a measure of your economic worthwhileness. Or at least that's what it's supposed to be. It isn't anything of the kind. But you went out, in other words, for the status instead of for the actuality.
Watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this. Watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this.
You do an art, you're a musician. Why do you play music? The only reason for playing music is to enjoy it. If you play music to impress an audience, read about yourself in the newspaper, you're not interested in music. So in the same way, why do I come and talk to you? Because I enjoy it. I like the sound of my own voice. I'm interested in what I'm talking about, and I get paid for it. And that's smart in this life, to get paid for what you enjoy. So here's the situation, you see? The whole idea of self-improvement is a will-o'-the-wisp and a hoax. That's not what it's about. Let's begin where we are. What happens if you know beyond any shadow of doubt that there is nothing you can do to be better? Well, it's kind of a relief, isn't it? You say, well, now what will I do? Because we're so used to making things better. Leave the world a better place than when you found it, sort of thing. I want to be of service to other people and all these dreadfully hazy ideas. But supposing instead of that, seeing that there isn't really anything we can do to improve ourselves or to improve the world, if we realize that that is so, it gives us a breather in the course of which we may simply
watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this. Watch what is going on. Watch what happens. Nobody ever does this. Nobody ever does this.
Therefore, it sounds terribly simple. It sounds so simple that it almost looks as if it isn't worth doing. Have you ever just watched? Watch what's happening and watch what you are doing by way of reaction to it. Just watch it happen. And don't be in a hurry to think you know what it is. In other words, people look, say, oh, that's the external world. Oh? How do you know? The whole thing, from a neurological point of view, is happening in your head. That you think there is something outside the skull is a notion in your nervous system. There may or may not be, but it's a notion in your nervous system. You think this is the material world. Well, that's somebody's philosophical idea. You think it's spiritual. That too is somebody's philosophical idea. This real world is not spiritual. It is not material. The real world is simply so could we look at things in that way without fixing labels, names and gradations and judgments on everything? But watch what happens. Watch what we do. But watch what happens. Watch what we do. Now you see, if you do that, you do at least give yourself a chance. And it may be that when you are in this way freed from busybodiness and being out to improve everything, that your own nature will begin to take care of itself. Because you're not getting in the way of yourself all the time. You will begin to find out the great things that you do are really happening. The great things that you do are really happening. For example, no great genius can explain how he does it. The great things that you do are really happening. Yes, he says, I have learned a technique to express myself because I had something in me that had to come out. If I were a musician, I had to learn how music is produced. If I want to describe something, I have to learn a language so that others can understand it. I need a technique. But then beyond that, I'm afraid I can't tell you how it was that I used that technique to express this mysterious thing I wanted to show you. If we could tell people, we would have schools where we would infallibly train musical geniuses, scientific miracle minds. And there would be so many of them, we wouldn't know what to do with them. Geniuses would be a dime a dozen. And then we would say, well, these people are after all not very ingenious. You know, PhDs, how many of them are there? Because what is fascinating always about genius is the fellow does something we can't understand. He surprises us. The great things that you do are really happening. The great things that you do are really happening. For example, no great genius can explain how he does it. The great things that you do are really happening. But you see, Just in the same way, we cannot understand our own brains. Neurology knows relatively little about the brain, which is only to say that the brain is a lot smarter than neurology. Yet there is this, which can perform all these extraordinary intellectual and cultural miracles. We don't know how we do, but we did. We didn't have some campaign to have an improved brain over the monkeys or whatever may be our ancestors. It happened. And all growth, you see, is fundamentally something that happens. But for it to happen, two things are important. And the first is, as I said, you must have the technical ability to express what happens. Secondly, you must get out of your own way. The great things that you do are really happening. The great things that you do are really happening. For example, no great genius can explain how he does it. The great things that you do are really happening. Showed you a system. Let's all practice getting out of our own way. It would turn into another form of self-improvement. See, here's the dynamics of this. And we find this problem, you see, repeatedly throughout the entire history of human spirituality. In the phraseology of Zen Buddhism, you cannot get this by thinking. You cannot attain to it by not thinking. As getting out of your own way ceases to be a matter of choice when you see that there's nothing else for you to do. When you see, in other words, that doing something about your situation is not going to help you. When you see equally that trying not to do anything about it is not going to help you. Where are you? Where do you stand? You're nonplussed. And you are simply reduced to watching. Now you may say, I need some help in this process, and therefore I am going to find someone else to help me. It may be a therapist. It may be a clergyman. It may be a guru. It may be any kind of person who teaches a technique of self-improvement. Now, how will you know whether this person is able to teach you? How can you judge, for example, whether a psychotherapist is effective or just a charlatan? How can you judge whether a guru is himself spiritually wise or merely a good chatterbox? Well, of course, you ask your friends, you ask his other students or patients, and they're all, of course, enthusiastic. You have to be enthusiastic when you bought something expensive. If you bought an automobile which turned out to be a lemon, it's very difficult to admit that it was a lemon and that you were fooled. And it's the same when you buy a religion or an expensive operation. But what people do not sufficiently realize is that when you pick an authority, whether it's a psychotherapeutic one or a religious one, You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. In other words, that this fellow or this book or this system is the right one is your opinion. And how are you competent to judge? After all, if you're saying to this other person or other source, I think you are the authority, that's your opinion. So you cannot really judge whether an authority is a sound authority unless you yourself are a sound authority. Otherwise, you may just be being fooled. You may say, for example, I believe that the Bible is the Word of God. All right, that's your opinion. I know the Bible says it's the Word of God, but it's your opinion that the Bible is not lying. The church says the Bible is the Word of God, but it's your opinion that the church is right. You cannot escape from that situation. It's your opinion. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. So you see, when you select an authority who will help you to improve yourself, it's like hiring the police out of your tax money and putting them in charge of seeing that you obey the law. I mean, can't you take care of yourselves? I mean, is this the land of the free and the home of the brave, or isn't it? Nobody seems to want to be in charge of themselves. Because they feel they can't do it. As St. Paul said, to will is present with me. But how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. To will is present with me. But how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. So there at once, we are in difficulty. Because trying to improve yourself is like trying to lift yourself up into the air by tugging at your own bootstraps. And it can't be done. To will is present with me. But how to do good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do. To will is present with me. But how to do good, I find not. For the good that I would, I do not. The evil that I would not, that I do.
It is a basic proposition for the Hindu, that only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. There is nothing other than the Godhead. There is nothing other than the Godhead. The appearance, the feeling that there are other things than the Godhead is called Maya. Maya. We ordinarily translate that word illusion. But you must be careful about the word illusion. Illusion is related to the Latin ludere. And that means play. And this is why the analogy of the world is dramatic. It's a play. In the sense of a stage play. Now, when you go to the theater, you know what you're going to see is not for real. But the actor, and you will hope that he will be good at it, is going to try and persuade you that it's for real. So that he will so move you that you are crying or sitting in anxiety upon the edge of your chair. And so the audience is almost persuaded to be taken in. Now what about if this would happen with the very best actor of all? The great actor. The audience would, of course, be completely taken in. But in this case, of course, the actor and the audience are the same. The self. The self. The Godhead is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. There is nothing other than the Godhead. There is nothing other than the Godhead.
Only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, Godhead is real.
The self has thus the capacity to abandon itself, to forget itself, to hide from itself, and thus to make the most completely convincing illusion. But in play, and so the activity, the creative activity of the Godhead in Hindus is called lila, which means play. Play. Our word lilt is related to it, I think. But so also in the book of Proverbs, you will find a discourse being given by the divine wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways before his works of old. Its delight was to rejoice, the King James Bible says, in the presence of God and with the sons of men. But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive. So also music is a kind of non-purposive thing, because you don't either play music to reach a destination, nor do you dance to reach a particular place on the floor. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Because after all, if the object of music were to gain a certain destination, those orchestras that played fastest would be considered the best. The best. Akira. Dancing and music, more than other arts, represent the nature of this world. The nature of this world. That it is playful, that it is sport. That it may be sincere, but is definitely not serious. And as G.K. Chesterton well put it once, the angels fly because they take themselves lightly. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music.
The angels fly because they take themselves lightly. The angels fly because they take themselves lightly. The angels fly because they take themselves lightly.
If a beautiful lady should say to me, I love you, and I were to reply, are you serious or are you just playing with me? That would be quite the wrong response. Because I hope she's not serious and that she will play with me. I should say, are you sincere or are you just toying? Because you see, the word play has many different senses. A person who is playing the organ in church is certainly not doing something trivial. When you go to see a play called Hamlet, you're not seeing something trivial. When the concert artist plays Mozart, he is certainly entertaining you, but it's not a trivial entertainment. But on the other hand, we would use play in quite a different sense, when we mean just fooling around, doing it for kicks. Kicks. Doing it for kicks. Doing it for kicks. So it is fundamental, as a matter of fact, to both the Hindu and the Christian tradition, that the universe is the play of God. But the Christian thinks of it in the terms of construction play, like building with blocks. The Hindu thinks of it as dramatic play, of the actual participation of the Godhead in the creation, so that every being whatsoever is God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise. Kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. Doing it for kicks. God in disguise. Kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. Hinduism speaks of the Godhead as, uses the word Brahman. This is a neuter form in Sanskrit from the root brih, which means to grow, to expand, to swell. The neuter form, Brahman, does not have quite the connotation then, you see, of kingship that we will find attached to the Western idea of God, but is also referred to as Atman. And this word we translate ordinarily the self. So you can have the Paramatman, which means para, the supreme self, or sometimes just the Atman alone, and that means the self in you. But the fundamental principle of Indian philosophy is Atman is Brahman. Your self is the supreme self. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. It is expressed also in the formula Tat Vam Asi. Colloquially translated, you're it. Or Tat, that, Tuam, Latin Tuam, you, Asi, are. You are that. That thou art. Tat, of course, is first word uttered by a baby. And fathers flatter themselves that it's saying dada. It's not. It's saying that. Pointing to thatness in everything. It's very important to see this, because everything is just that. Which you won't appreciate at first, perhaps. Everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Only words have meaning. because they point to something other than themselves. The sound water is undrinkable, but it points to the drinkable reality. When you say, though, what is that? Pointing at the water, and somebody says, water, he's not being correct, because what you're pointing at is not the noise water. So it's not water. It's that. It's that. And water's a kind of jazz. It's just doing that. It's doing that. People are a kind of jazz. They talk and communicate with each other, but what does that mean? Well, they get together and they make more people, and they do this and they do that, and they do this and they do that, and they eat and they go on doing this jazz, but it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. Jazz. And you begin to see, as you do that, everything's like music, you see. It's all these complicated vibrations. In all kinds of ways. There's a myth. There is in the beginning the divine bird which lays the egg of the world. And the egg splits. And the upper is the heavens and the lower is the earth. So when the worlds are manifested, the Lord breathing out says, hung. And when the worlds are withdrawn, the breath comes back. But if you say hung, sa, hung, sa, hung, sa, hung, it becomes sa, hung, sa, sa, ahang. That means, sa means that, the truth, ahang, I am that. Imagine when we get to the final moment in which the world is blown up. Imagine the countdown. This is the end. Somebody's pushed the button. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can sit and listen to the little waves on the seashore. And you'll get back here into this kind of thinking, and you're hearing the ocean of the universe going. And that's your breathing, too. It's all one rhythm. So it may be that every star was once a planet populated by intelligent people who found out about the fundamental energy of the universe, blew themselves up. And as they blew up, they scattered all kinds of stuff out, which became little planets. Which in a long time, life started all over again. What are you listening to? What are you listening to? Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave. The Hindu theory is very odd. Every kalpa in the Manvantara period, whether the manifested world, is divided into 4 subdivisions of time, each one of which is called a yuga. That means roughly an epoch or an era. And there are 4 yugas, and they're named after the different throws in the Indian game of dice. There are 4 such throws, and the first is called Krita. That means, Kri means to do. That's when we say something is done, truly done. It's the perfect throw of 4. The second is called Treta, which is the throw of 3. The next is called Svapara, which is the throw of 2. And the final one is called Kali, which means the worst throw, which is the throw of 1. Now, each of these periods of the Kalpa are of different lengths. Krita is the longest, and Kali is the shortest, and so ranged. So that when the world is first manifested, as in those dreams that I was mentioning to you, the world is in a golden age to begin with. It is perfect. It is perfect. And that is the longest period of time. Then when we get a little bit more adventurous, you see, Treta means that in this era, a kind of disharmonious element enters into things. It's like a 3-legged chair isn't so secure as a 4-legged chair. It's just a bit inclined to tip. And as it were, a fly in the ointment, the snake in the garden. Then comes Dwapara, in which the forces of good and evil are equally balanced. And finally Kali, which is the shortest period, where the forces of evil are triumphant. And the world is destroyed at the end of it. For then the Godhead appears in the form of Shiva, who represents the destructive aspect of the divine energy, whereas Brahma is the creative, Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer. But Shiva is always the destroyer in the sense of the liberator, the guy who breaks up the ruts. And he comes on with a blue body and 10 arms, and a necklace of skulls. Indian gods have many arms, because they are cosmic centipedes. They do all things without having to think about it. Like the centipede doesn't have to think about how to manipulate its legs. Like you don't have to think how to grow your hair. And as Shiva dances what is called the Tandava, which is the dance of destruction at the end of the cycle, at the end of the Kalpa, you will see that his hands contain clubs and knives and bells. But one hand is like that. And that gesture means don't be afraid. It's a big act. It is all, as it were, the outflowing of your own consciousness, of your own mind. The Hindu life is related to this cosmology. And the objective of life is, of course, in the end, to wake up from the dream when you've had enough. And so the dreaming process is called sometimes samsara. Samsara is the round, the rat race. Samsara is divided into 6 divisions. This is the world of the Deva. This is the same root from which we get both divine and devil. But Deva means angel. The highest and most successful beings in the universe. And so opposite, this is the world of Naraka, who are the most unsuccessful. These are the purgatorial worlds of extreme suffering. This is the world of Ashura. They are but they're angry angels, representing the wrath potential of energy. This is the world of animals. This is the world of preta, for which we have no English equivalent. They're hungry or frustrated spirits who have enormous stomachs but mouths only the size of needles, vast appetite and no means of fulfillment. And this is the Manu world, that is to say, the world of man. You don't have to take this literally. You could say, when you're extremely happy or ecstatic, you're here. When you are miserable, you're here. When you're dumb, you're here. When you're mad, you're here. When you're frustrated, you're here. But when you're more or less your normal, rational self, you're here. All life, through the period of the kalpas, goes grinding around this wheel. And if you go up, and you succeed, and you get to the top, you have to come down. They don't see success, in other words, in the world as a method of liberation, because it implies failure. The idea of liberation, which is called moksha, is the ideal of Hindu life. Wake up, it's a dream. There is no hope in time. Everything is going to get worse in time. Because, as you know, it does. We all fall apart in the end. Everything falls apart. Institutions, buildings, nations, it all crumbles. And people say, well, that's an awfully pessimistic philosophy. Well, is it? Well, is it? I would rather say that the people who have hope in the future are the miserable people. Because they're like donkeys, chasing carrots that are dangled before their noses from sticks attached to their collars. And they pursue in vain, always hoping that tomorrow will be the great thing. The great thing. The great thing. Always hoping that tomorrow will be the great thing. The great thing. The great thing. And therefore incapable of enjoying themselves today. People who live for the future never get there. Because when their plans mature, they're not there to enjoy them. They're the sort of people who spend their lives saving for their old age and try to teach their children to do the same thing. Always hoping that tomorrow will be the great thing. The great thing. The great thing. Always hoping that tomorrow will be the great thing. The great thing. The great thing. And therefore incapable of enjoying themselves today. That life is transient is part of its liveliness. The poets, in speaking of the transience of the world, always utter their best poetry. You know, our revels now are ending. told you, are all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great earth itself, by all which it inherits shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. We are such stuff as dreams are made of. And our little life is rounded with a sleep. And said so well, it doesn't seem so bad after all, does it? You see, there's always in the poetry of evanescence a kind of funny nostalgia. Moralists will say, those lovely lips which you so delight to kiss today will in a few years rot and disclose the grinning teeth of the skull.